Welcome to Between Two Clinicians, the podcast that gives you a backstage pass into the mind of two therapists. I'm Talia.
I'm Adam Luke. We've spent years helping others navigate the complexities of their minds and relationships.
In this podcast, we're flipping the script, and we're sharing our own unfiltered insights. No topic is off limits, and no issue too taboo. We're ready to tackle the tough stuff with honesty and empathy. Let's dive in.
Here we are.
Here we are. Look at us. 30, flirty, and thriving. If somebody hasn't named a podcast that yet by now, they need to.
Yeah, someone's like sleeping at the wheel, basically.
Yeah.
I just don't know as a married man if that's how I should. Yeah, but
I too, as a married man, also probably. Just kidding. Just kidding. That's not the topic for today. The topic for today is something you brought up that I think when we were like negotiating a little bit more of making sure what we touched on, the title flew out of my mouth. And it's something I've heard before. This is not like a quote that I came up with. Maybe this wording is, but the concept of it, you as a person, we collectively ought to be striving for being like, be the first you, not the next everybody else. And so many people are striving, like we were talking about, to go viral or to be the next, like you mentioned, like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs or figurehead of some very transformational company or some invention that really changes lives, which is phenomenal. However, I have a spin on that I think it's more difficult to do that in some ways than it used to be, simply because there's so many people on earth and there's so many concepts, there's so many specialties, there's so many skills and trades that have already been invented. It doesn't mean that more can't be, but there is a more limited capacity. Like back when the wheel didn't exist, the first person to invent the wheel was like, this is awesome. And then how much that has changed the trajectory of being able to do so many things. Similar with people wanting to be the next version of somebody else. Well, you could be that, or you could be the first version of yourself. There's only one you in the world. And I think that's part of what we can touch on in today's topics. Then we have a couple of new segments that we're adding into the podcast, but that's not going to be till the end. That's a new thing for us. So stay tuned till the end of the episode if you want to learn more about those. But I'm going to let you take it away because you started talking about success is not an entitlement, I think is how you worded it. I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, now just hearing you say it out loud, I'm like, okay, so I'm not entitled to success was probably the easiest way of putting that.
Yes.
And that's how I should have phrased it. Your quote there like helped structure the conversation that I want to have, because I think that we're entering into this situation with, we're getting so much information, whether it comes from social media, the internet. We just have such interconnectivity with the world around us. That's very easy for us to imagine that we need to become these things that we think are trendy.
Right.
And so I don't want to pigeonhole the conversation with just saying people are trying to be viral, but people are not trying to become the best versions of themselves. They are trying to become the things they think people want them to be.
Yes.
And the challenge in that is that then we end up with individuals that are extremely depressed, unmotivated, lacking self-confidence, because I'm constantly sort of like striving, or I'm communicating to myself that I need to become this thing that inherently I never will be. And I'm not here to rain on parades. That's not what I'm saying. It's just, something that I was working with a client earlier this week. The framing of the conversation came up with like, I am so frustrated when I hear people tell my son he can become anything he wants to be. Right. And I could hear all that frustration that was coming from this father. And now, again, he wasn't actually saying he doesn't want his kid to be successful.
Of course.
But he's like, oh, we're setting him up for failure. I was like, no. He could literally attempt to become whatever he would like to be, but he may not be successful at it. He may not make money. It may not be something that carries him, right? And if we're honest with ourselves, very few of us are going to graduate from high school and walk into a factory and work there for 60 years and then retire, right? That world is over.
Yes.
And so really we're invited into, you have the potential to maybe be 2 or 3 different things throughout a lifetime, and I can tell you something that I didn't even think about was the conversion for me becoming a father.
Yes.
Like that's another thing that falls on the experience chart. But if I was like hell bent on trying to become the next it thing or the next hashtag, Oof. I think I would be in a constant state of disappointment.
And there's a version of ourselves that we become when we're striving for either a goal or a certain identity, like people who are trying to have kids. That's always my favorite
Yeah.
joke. Like, we're trying. I'm like, oh, literally right now. Like, you just did. Oh, cool. Like, good for you. That's really awesome. I didn't need to know that information. Just let me know when you're successful. It's kind of gross to know that. No, but when you're striving for a certain identity, or like when we were years ago waiting to take the board exams that we had to take, waiting to finish the licensure mark of 3, or the hour mark of 3,000 hours, which is fucking grueling. And there's so many times where I was hitting a wall and I'm like, I just want to be done already. And finally, when I hit that, and then you have to wait for the board to get back to you, it's like I've accomplished something. And I remember getting I failed my first exam, but 4 months later I passed the second one, the redo of the clinical. And I remember getting the sheet of paper and I felt so underwhelmed. And I texted my former supervisor and I said, like, what gives? Where's Publishers Clearinghouse showing up to my house with balloons and a check and excitement? And like,
oh, absolutely.
And I posted about it on social media because I wanted to share. Part of it was the business thing of like, hey, I can take on my own clients, what have you. Like, there was the marketing reason for sharing it. But then there's also the seeking external validation and congratulations and commendations, which naturally when people share their accomplishments, I think in part, or they're seeking that. And after that, post was done and people were done commenting, I'm like, this was severely underwhelming because I had worked and strived for years for this goal. Even before I started grad school, like I knew that was on the horizon. And then you're just like, oh, that was it. So there's the
no parade,
right? No parade, and none for. It's like the meme with the dog. That's like they think the dog thinks its parade is for him, and the person's like, it is for him. Like, just let's get it straight. The parade is for the dog. That there's a expectation when you are spending so much of your time almost shifting into the identity or prepping to be a parent. Like for me, parenthood was something that was a surprise. I haven't really talked about that, but I didn't know if I could even have a child. So I wasn't worried about that. And then all of a sudden they're like, you're pregnant. And I was like, I'm sorry, what? So I had to make a very quick shift into the identity of parenthood. And I almost didn't want to be a parent because I knew how all encompassing it was. And that people were like, what? You've studied attachment. You took your infant adolescent training, whatever. And I said, yeah, that's exactly why I didn't want to do it, because I knew too much about it. And I knew how much it can go well when you're attuned and how poorly it can go when you're not. And I don't want to mess that up. And I was at the point in my career where I was taking off like 100%. And I don't know what it would have ended up being if I didn't end up getting pregnant. I'm kind of coming back on track now. But that feeling of you can be anything you want and you can do it all, especially the motherhood narrative we receive. I don't know if dads receive this too. You can do it all, just not all at once. But so much of that second part of the sentence isn't included. And that's where the mom guilt especially comes from, or the parental guilt of, I want to be the star at work, or I want to be the next thing that's trending, or what have you. And I think part of this conversation too, that I have a note for, like the next section is like fame versus notoriety. But when we're looking at this identity shift, you can't do it all at once. And you have to pick which one you prioritize at certain points of your life. And so, yes, you can be everything that you want if you at least look at it like you could try. It doesn't mean you're going to be, like you said, like you're not going to get to NFL player. You look at the statistics of it. It's like from high school, then it's or like from middle school to high school is this many. And from high school to college is this many. From high school to like who get drafted. Like there's a funnel that happens and only a certain amount of people end up at the top of those funnels. That's not to say that there's only skill involved. Sometimes it's they knew a person. Sometimes their clip went viral, so it put them in front of scouts that they otherwise wouldn't have been. There's now a blend in society where it's not just that you're good at something that you get the success. It's not just if you know somebody that you get success, because there's plenty of people who just have their jobs based on their connections. They're not actually very good at their jobs. It's now a perfect storm. You have to be good at what you do. You have to be known for what you do and know somebody who can get you connected, most likely. And there's some mix of notoriety or marketing that goes into your skill. And I think that's where also touching on fame versus notoriety, when you're looking at not everybody is entitled to that. There's people who I've had in my office too, or I've asked this question, like, why not me? Why does this person get to have whatever this is and not me? And sometimes it really checked me because I looked at it. I'm like, oh, wait, but I have all this other stuff that I'm also sure most everybody else wants in their life and might be jealous or envious of. And I'm not even appreciating that. I'm so focused on, I want to be successful in this one area. I haven't even taken a look at all the other areas that I'm successful in. And I think that can block people too.
Well, and I'm not even allowing myself to become successful in any one
Right,
area
right.
because I'm sort of shooting on the margin
Mhm.
where I'm like, oh, well, these 12 things I'm
Mhm.
going to attempt, but you half-assed all 12 things.
Right, right.
Like, what if you
Go
whole
all
ass
in.
one
Whole
thing?
ass
So,
one thing. Yes.
like you need to focus on that. You know, a phrase that came up with a friend of mine yesterday, and he was like, I reject that statement, but something I've really been using in my own life is that, comparison is a thief of joy.
Yes. Yes, it
So
is.
like there is so many times that like clients will come in and they'll tell me this week wasn't that great, or
Yeah.
I start most sessions with a high and a low where I'm like, hey,
Yes.
tell me the victory of the week,
Yep.
tell me the absolute basement of the week, like
Mhm.
tell me where it was. I'm like, oh, I don't know about the victory, but the basement wasn't it? Like,
Mhm.
and they can give me the
Yes.
best reenactment of
Yes.
the terrible side of the week, but then there's no victory.
Mhm.
And the problem is we don't give ourselves props. We don't celebrate anything that we do well
Mhm.
because it wasn't good enough,
Yes, or it
right?
wasn't
Like,
to what somebody else did. Well, so and so did, like you said, comparison. So and so did this and they got this from it, or they said they feel this from it. Why don't I? Can we stop for a moment and recognize that you did the thing? But so many people don't want to stop
yeah.
there.
Well, I mean, like, I love to come back to like, what's your personal record?
Mhm.
Tell me your personal record. Because, like, this happens all the time when you're in the gym.
Yes.
So you go into the gym and it doesn't matter. I've been on both ends of the scale. There was a period of time where I was extremely fit in my early 20s where I had no problem bench pressing. What was my max on that? I think I got up to like 80s of like dumbbell
Mm.
presses. Like, I just
Mhm.
loved those, right? And I could just chill, sit there. I could do 6x12s and
Mhm.
be good to
Mhm.
go. And then the problem is now when you sit down and you're like, okay, well, I'm now maybe at 45s, maybe I'm at 50s, whatever it is that I'm doing for my dumbbell presses. I can look over and sure as shit, there's always some dude there with like 125
Yep.
dumbbells just going crazy. Now, do I sit there and I tell myself, like, oh, what a piece of shit you are that you
Mm.
can't keep up with that guy? Because I have no idea what his story is.
Yeah.
And he has no idea what my story
Right.
is. But what I do look at is every time I go into the gym, I'm just shooting to be a little bit better than who I was yesterday. And that is manageable
Mhm.
growth.
Mhm.
But see, if I don't let myself do that, if I come away and I'm like, dude, that guy was ripped, he's doing all this stuff, and then I decide to take the next couple of days off because I want to be mopey, I am not owed the success I never put the work in to achieve.
Yes. Yeah. What is the quote? You can't be upset by the results you didn't get from the work you didn't put in to get there, something
Yeah,
to that
you can't
effect.
be disappointed.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't be.
I mean, people still
So,
choose to. That's like going to our other episodes about like the victim mindset,
oh, absolutely.
that people still choose to do that. However, there's a certain there's a certain mentality I believe people benefit from adopting when they're trying to be, as we talked about with the title, like if I'm trying to be the first me, I may look to what others are doing for inspiration, which is different than
Mm,
looking to what others are doing for comparison. And in terms of like
yeah.
downgrading yourself in comparison. But if you're looking for others for inspiration, this is often where art, like metamorphosizes, if that's a word it is now,
Mm,
into others. So it's like other people write books. It's not like the first person who wrote a book to everybody who wrote a book after is like, you stole my idea. It's like, no, fucking books exist. Like there's books on many different topics, and there's also a lot of books on the same topic, but each of them have a different spin because it's authored by somebody who,
unique individuals.
yes, and you want to learn from them specifically. There's a lot of
Mm,
creators who talk about relationships. As far as I know, I'm the only Talia
yeah.
Bombola that exists on Earth. I'm the only one with my brain. You're the only Adam Luke, maybe not name wise, it's a bit more common, but you're the only Adam Luke with your specific brain, and you're like, excuse me, you are the only
Yeah.
Adam Luke.
Who's this?
Who's this bitch? Yeah, you find another one, canceled, report. Yeah, I'm the only one of me. So I wasn't going
For
to
sure.
look to other people. And I'm doing some business coaching for newer therapists now. And they're like, well, I want to have what you have. And I'm like, first of all, no, you don't. because it's a lot to manage. Second of all, it's impossible. It's not impossible in the sense that you could mimic some of it, but it's impossible to have the exact ratio, proportions, or what ingredients, what have you,
Yeah.
as I do, because when I got to the whatever level of success here or notoriety here or what have you, right? Success, fame, and notoriety kind of on a triangle. The world was different. Social media wasn't as popular. There wasn't AI. COVID hit, so that really helped with business. Like, there's a perfect storm of events that I think a lot of people don't look to. I wasn't a big history major or like history buff at all, but I do think the concept of the purpose of looking back at history is to learn from it to better execute on the future. I'm a fan of that, but like in high school, I'm like, World War II, really? Like, and I knew I was going into this kind of field. So for me, I really didn't need to know that part of it. I wasn't going to be in like poli-sci or whatever, but it's learning about human behavior that if I look back at what led to my success in some areas, I can list it out, and that might not be applicable or replicable for the person I would give the list to. And so it's not about gatekeeping the information to what makes people successful.
No.
We can watch documentaries on Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, Bill Gates, what have you, and take a look at their exact blueprint. I can guarantee you if they wrote out their exact blueprint, first of all, you could give it to 100 people. A third of them might not even take a look at it. They're like, oh, I could never get there, so I'm just going to write it off. That's not for me. A third of them would be like, okay, I'll do it, but I'll do it my way, which is not the exact way they did it. And then the other third who follow it to a T are now going to be all in competition with each other. And that's what we see with creators on Instagram. That if you're in that constant competition, sometimes whatever, the reel might pop off, and that could be a fluke. That could be happenstance because they have thousands of dollars of a media team behind them. That could be because they have some sort of marketing strategy. You never know necessarily exactly what leads a person to that success. So no, not everybody is entitled to success. And if you want to be the first you, not the next everybody else, there's that middle ground sweet spot. Let me look to what others are doing for inspiration and make it my own and put my blinders on, because I don't really care. The time I was the most successful at social media, I followed no one else. I didn't give a fuck about anybody else in terms of the pages of like comparison. I cared about people, but I wasn't like, oh, what is this person doing? And I had my blinders on. It was like memes, captions, this, and it was popping off all the time. I never answered comments. I was like, this is my specialty and I'm not going to do anything else. The second
you stayed in your lane.
The second I started caring and I saw other creators, my confidence took a hit. I felt disappointed. I was like, oh, I'm not the only one. And I sat in that mopingness for a while. And then I was like, oh, wait, I'm not the only one. The pressure's off of me. I felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders to try to talk about every topic. And when I realized that wasn't just on me and it wasn't just my responsibility, then I found my groove again. But it's like a braiding process where you have to weave in new information and eventually it becomes congruent and second nature. But in the beginning, when you're trying to be the first you and not the next everybody else, I really recommend to people to only look to others for that inspiration of like, oh, I'm hitting a block of my usual creativity. What is doing well now that my flair could then be well known for, rather than let me replicate this exactly.
Well, yeah, your dream shouldn't be someone else's reheated leftovers.
Yes.
And that's the situation that we're in, where a lot of us are like, oh no, let me reheat that, because we're looking at what's good enough, not what do I actually want.
Or what went viral, like you said.
So like, I think a perfect example is like, so when you and I first started as interns, right? Very much we were in competition with each other. I'll just call it out. I felt like I was in competition with you because there was very few other interns that were willing to make the posts that we were making on Facebook and all the different little groups,
marketing,
and
networking,
doing podcasts and doing reels. And so you, and I think Judy Yen was basically like the trendsetters in that way. And there was this feeling of like, oh, we're all in competition with each other, but none of us could replicate what the others were doing.
Right.
Like, I can't be Judy Yen. I can't be you. You can't be me.
I don't look good with the beard, so I can't be you. Yeah.
Exactly. And so we could sit in this position where we can say, all right, well, you're going to be my competition. So I'm going to try to be Talia in freaking Huntington Beach when I'm not going to pull the same clientele. Just naturally, I'm not going to pull them. They're not looking to come to an emotionally safe truck driver. That's not what they're looking for.
Not the vibe. Yeah.
It's not the vibe. Some, but not all.
Mhm.
And so this is that situation where I can get so locked into being so frustrated that I can't be you that I never step into me being me.
Yes. Yes. And I think for people who are listening to this who also just had that like aha moment dawn on them, there are seasons of your life where you are so in your own flow. You are so focused on I'm going to be me and like F everybody else, where you're again blinders on, single lane. That's a good season to ride you to this high. And then reality checks you, where you check yourself, right? By looking at what other people are doing and do the comparison piece. And then you look at it and you're like, oh, I'm not, it's like the Rainbow Fish kids book. Oh, I'm not that special. Like I have maybe less shiny skills than I thought. Other people are doing differently or better relative to me at this, or they're getting more clients, or they're seeing more financial success or what have you. Not everybody can replicate it because again, there's so much that goes into it. Sometimes it's skill, sometimes it's luck, it's who you know, and the time of the year, the time of life and history of that you're doing it, that it still is necessary for everybody to participate in the system. And I think for people who are listening to this and you're one of many in your field, whether it's athletics or sales or a certain other career field, there's only one you. And the more you focus on how can I, whatever insert name here, be the best of my version of myself, how can I hold myself accountable to be what I want and to be successful in my own right, which is how I how I define success might be different than how you or our listeners define it. What can get me to my own success is likely not comparing myself to what other people were successful at. I do not like selling. I feel icky. I feel like it takes advantage of people because, personal share, I was sold to by a high ticket coach that it was absolute garbage. She never answered Voxer. She was a terrible coach. Now she's like posting, oh, I made this much money from this whatever thing she was coaching on. I got in the program. It wasn't even what I bought. She decided to switch it 2 months in. Like, it's the buyer beware. And so because I had such a negative experience, it's almost like a PTSD response from it. I never want somebody to see me the way that I see her. However, just keeping it in that thought blocks me from not being her, but being my own version of somebody who can sell and not have a person feel sold to. And that's where I think the spin of being therapist is important to bring in here. We have a different mindset because of our field. We market the shit out of ourselves and network a ton. We do not force clients to come in. We are a unique field in which the person has to be willing, desirous, and ethically making the consenting decision on their own. And they sign documents attesting to this. I want what you have. I know the cost up front. I'm willing to pay for it. They might not know how many sessions, but like we could guesstimate when they first come in, but we do not have to sell them. We are not trying to go get clients in that sense of like knocking on people's doors like solar panel salesmen and being like, hey, you own a home. Do you want solar? We're not walking and being like, hey, you have a family. Are they messed up? Do you want therapy? Like, we can't do that. We can network ourselves and we put ourselves out there to a point where people go, I want what they're selling, not literally selling, but I'm picking up what they're putting down. I like that person's vibe and I've wanted to go to therapy. Decision is made. So when you're looking at what makes some career fields successful, sometimes it's not replicable in other career fields. And I don't think that I could go to the Olympics for a sport that I've never played before. So it would be delusional of me to be like, it's really a bummer that I never did that in my life.
Well, so perfect example. Yeah. So you never went to the Olympics, but what if that meant that you never became the therapist you are today?
Yeah, it's a trade-off. It's always a trade-off.
That's where I try to really wrestle with some of my clients of like, okay, you can't get the thing you want. That doesn't mean that you can't get anything else.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Like there's something else there, you know, because what you want is maybe not what you need.
And what it's sometimes not meant for you. Sometimes you think of an idea that's your idea to birth. It's not your idea to create and get credit for. And now, time for an ad break. Hey there, listeners. We're interrupting your favorite podcast to bring you a special message from our friends over at Therapy Swag. Are you tired of the same old boring wardrobe? Ready to add a dash of sass and style into your closet while repping mental health? Look no further than Therapy Swag, your go-to online store for snarky shirts and mugs. Their products make awesome gifts for friends, family, or anyone in need of a little pick-me-up. They're on a mission to break the stigma surrounding mental health. They use humor and creativity to open up dialogue, challenge stereotypes, and remind us it's okay to not be okay. Because let's face it, laughter is the best medicine. So why settle for ordinary when you can stand out with therapy swag? Head over to their website today and treat yourself to some snarky goodness. Trust us, your wardrobe and your mood will thank you. Thanks to our sponsor for supporting the show. Now back to your regularly scheduled programming.
There was a quote that I saw out of like the 17th century that I was like, holy shit, that's a pretty good quote, which was, it was like some deacon that basically said, a special level of hell is getting everything that you want. And it's
honestly
like,
true.
Oh, fuck.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, that hits different. Mm-hmm. Because, yeah, if you actually got everything that you wanted, you wouldn't be that dynamic as an individual.
There's no striving
like
anymore.
The depth of you as a person, not there.
Yeah.
But see, we use adversity in the wrong way now. We almost use adversity as a guardrail versus something that you're supposed to push past.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like, adversity very much is the rock in the middle of your path, but you get to, like, climb the rock.
Mm-hmm.
You get to climb up and pass on.
But so many people, they look at it and they're just paralyzed by it. No. Right.
And what happens? It's always that first person that pivots and says, I'll accept a lesser version of myself. And then everyone else goes, oh, well, how courageous. Let me join them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? And sometimes there's not courage in accepting less for yourself. Like, True. And less for yourself, when I'm talking about that, is moving into that victim statement of like, oh, that thing never happened. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. So the end of your athletic career happened. Mm-hmm. Like, I've been blessed to work with a lot of athletes, yes. Whether it's D1, whether it's people who've been drafted, mm-hmm. people who are in professional leagues. Like, and what inevitably happens is that career comes to a close. Yes. Some people, it comes to a close because of medical issues. Injuries. They never get to the draft. Mm-hmm. Other people get drafted and they get injured on the practice squad. And it's not the story of like, and then the story ended. Mm-mm. There is this whole new space for, wait a second. So you're telling me that you have that level of tenacity, you have that level of grit, you have that level of resiliency, that level of discipline, and you can't be good at anything else? Mm-hmm. The reality is you were playing a game. You take just facets of what you had in that and you apply it to anything else in life, and you probably will be successful. Mm-hmm. But you have to be the one that gives yourself permission to move on.
And keep the dream alive in some way. Like, I'm thinking the people who get injured, athletics is a good example, because professional athletes, again, whether it's an injury early on, mm-hmm. later on, or retirement, the dream or the reality of I am a, or I could have been, or I was a professional athlete, it all has to come to a close eventually mm-hmm. when we retire from being therapists. That we're not going to continue. I mean, I think in the first year, usually in retirement, it's normal to slip up and be like, I just retired. Like, there's a natural linguistic shift. There's still this concept, though, and I'm working through this in live time, so it might sound kind of wonky. When I'm injured in the practice squad, the grief that I'm moving through is what could have been. What if I hadn't gotten injured? What if I had seen this whole career through instead of also looking at it like, I got this far. Yes, I would have liked to go further, but I did get this far. Can I sit in that and honor the grief? And for the people who didn't get injured in the practice squad, they have the whole professional career and then they retire or they just get old, or they're like, hey, I want to go have kids or whatever. There's still grief involved. There's still a dream that isn't a reality anymore that you have to shift away from. And that, I think, is also important to bring up in the framework of not being success is not an entitlement and wanting to be the first you, not the next everyone else, mm-hmm. is when you're looking at that shift, how much of your identity is, mm-hmm. this is going to sound redundant, but how much of your identity was wrapped up in that identity? If that identity isn't in existence anymore, who are you? If my spouse passes away, who am I? If my career goes away, who am I? And as humans, I think part of it is like identification, but part of it is also seeking so much solace in, I have social status, I have a career, I have my, on the game of life, I have my players on the board, I have my little people in the car. Okay, but we can't only define ourselves in relation to the career, in relationship to partnership, in relationship to whatever other identity markers there are, because there's a very real possibility those could go away. And I think that's also what we saw during COVID. that not only unfortunately, some businesses failed because what they were doing in relation to their other markers went away naturally. Other people got more creative. They didn't let it stop them. Like you're saying, they saw that adversity and they saw adversity as an opportunity rather than as the end of the road. And I think for the mindset for people to adopt, how can I be the next me? Look at what I would do when I would do research or anything like that. I would look at the results and discussion sections of other people's papers, look at where they said they failed, where they said they didn't do well, and go, that's the topic I'm going to use. It already had proof. It already had the fact that there was an experiment. I'm going to do less work by using their work that they've already done. And I'm going to take a look at how I could redo that or modify it or look at what they said they would have optimized, add in my own flair, and boom, that's my own creative project or research. So it's knowing how to look at other people's success or failure, self-defined, and learn from it, but still honoring who you are and not solely identifying yourself as, I'm finally this career I've always wanted. I'm finally a mom. Parenthood is also an identity that we've talked about this, that shifts over time. Your kids need you a ton in the beginning, and ideally they want you more as you get older, but they don't need you in the same ways. Who are you when you're an empty nester? You can't only tie your identity into these current day-to-day things because they could go away. And I think that's worth saying, because when you're looking at defining success, yes, you're going to have it. I arguably have everything I've wanted in life. It's going to go away. A lot of it went away when I had a baby. A lot of the fame and the success that I really enjoyed at least had to take a pause. And I could have been like, okay, that's it. I'm packing up shop and closing up my office. Or I could be like, this is a season. This is a season where my primary identity isn't based on being a therapist or a coach or whatever. It's around being more family oriented. And there's going to be a season when she goes to school that I will have much more time on my hands, that she's not needing me. She's attended to by others, that then I can meet my own needs. And so viewing it as it's a living organism. Your identity is a living organism, and success is going to look different and be defined differently depending on the phase of life that you're at.
I mean, so something I'm taking away from everything that you just said is I have to actually let myself fail.
Yes.
Like, to be successful,
and be rejected.
I have to let myself fail.
Yes.
Because that's the problem, is everyone's looking at everyone else's sort of report cards and, so that's where you tripped and you fell. So I won't do that. But then I rob myself of any potential experience where I could actually be successful in that thing.
And I could go
just because someone else has stumbled doesn't mean that that's my spot where I trip and I fall.
No, I could go through the same thing and have a different outcome. That's with parents and teens. They try to mitigate any risk for their teenagers, or they're like, well, I was a teen mom, so I'm never going to let them have a relationship because what if they get pregnant? And I'm like, newsflash. You know, you can get pregnant without being in a relationship. Like, that is a thing that could happen, especially for teenagers, because casual sex is a thing. Like, you can't prevent every negative outcome. The best job as a role model, whether that's parent, mentor, business owner, what have you, is to explain the pitfalls, explain the stumbles, and like the results and discussion section, give some feedback of what you think could have gone differently, and with parameters, allow the person, like, what led to the teenage pregnancy? Probably, this is God willing, everything went well. Maybe lack of sex education, maybe lack of parents being home. Maybe it was a latchkey kid situation. Maybe it was parents were so averse to talking about relationships, the kid didn't know healthy from unhealthy. Like, there's so many factors that go into it that it's like, I'd rather equip you with everything I didn't have to maybe make the same decision and hopefully have a different outcome. And that's the case in both personal and in business. It's not a guarantee that you're going to do what I was successful at and succeed. It's also not a guarantee that you're going to do what I failed at and fail. It's two sides of the same coin. Yeah.
I mean, there's another podcast I love to listen to called the Dry Creek Wrangler.
Ooh.
And he's just this awesome dude. He's been teaching horsemanship skills forever. And so he gets a lot of people that are coming in that are trying to, they want to be cowboys, cowgals, whatever it is. But he has this great saying where he says, the man who is not tested has no virtue. And that applies to all of us when we're essentially stealing ourselves away from being tested. So you can't sit there and be frustrated with the lack of success you're having if you've never allowed yourself to go through adversity. Again, don't use it as a guardrail. It's something that we need to overcome. But it's this idea of, just because other people have stumbled and fallen in certain places doesn't mean that you get to abdicate your responsibility from finishing your hike. Like, you have to run your race. And, I hope that as you guys are listening to this, it's unlocking different ways of, it's really easy to be in seasons of life where it's funny now that you and I have both navigated like having kids, like that in itself is a new bubble for us to be in.
Mm-hmm.
Then before we know it, it's going to be owning our own homes,
Mm-hmm.
different
Mm-hmm.
bubble for us to be in. A successful business owners, we're already in that,
Yeah.
that bubble.
Yeah.
But we're always sort of, we're acting as if we're not supposed to experience certain trials and tribulations when we're moving into these different bubbles.
Right.
Like
Right.
you're always becoming something new, something bigger, something greater in your life. And you're going to have to go through experiences that are going to be uncomfortable so that one day you will find yourself in a comfortable place.
Yeah. Growth. I think it was a few years ago. I don't know when I posted it, but it was something to the effect, I can't even quote myself. You won't grow unless you learn to tolerate discomfort. That's what I said. And it came out during a coaching session because growth requires discomfort. Sorry, not everything's going to feel good. I'm not saying put yourself through like immeasurable pain,
Yeah.
but not everything is going to feel good when you grow. I wouldn't have gotten to this point in business being comfortable hiring out, doing media coaching, whatever else, had I not gotten to a place where I'm like, oh, my recipe for success doesn't apply anymore. My Instagram virality recipe doesn't exist anymore because of AI and all these other things. I could either close up shop or pivot. So I chose to pivot. But I wouldn't have, I look at those, like you're saying, I look at those opportunities now for growth, and I know some of it's going to hurt and I know some of it's going to suck, but in the end I trust that it's going to be worth it. I don't have a mistrust of the outcome, and that's something we touched on too before we get into our segments. If you are only doing something for the ideal result of X, but Y happens instead, would you still do it? So if I'm only posting because I want to become viral, I'm probably not going to have my heart in it. And being viral was never my goal. I just thought memes were funny. And the same thing with our reels now with the podcast. I want it out there because there could be literally one person who hears it and goes, that helped me. Thank you. That's my goal. If it also happens to go viral, if it also happens to help our businesses, great.
Wonderful.
But that's not my main goal. And that's the headbutt that I think a lot of people reach when they try to outsource or hire help or ask their friends or family or a therapist, like, what do I do about this? Also keep in mind, only you know your goal and only you know how you feel about what that goal is. Yep. Do not let that go. That's been core centered to my identity, that it's not about the fame. It's not about the notoriety. And that's why I'll show up with no makeup, my hair tied, my this might spit up. Like, I don't care how I look. I care what I'm saying, and I care that the information gets in the right ears. And that's part of my authentic brand. For others, that might not be part of their authentic brand.
True.
You have the like you said, the emotionally available truck driver vibe. That's your brand. You're known for that. It would be weird if you all of a sudden were buttoned up and wore suits. If you chose to do that and you're like, look, this is my new direction, the vibe would be so different that it would attract the right people. But if you did it because you thought everybody else would like you more if you did, people are going to sense the incongruency. So keep in mind, like, I wanted to leave that portion of the episode with, like, keep in mind, if you're only doing something with the goal of like, well, I hope it makes me famous, you're going to lose steam. Like, would you still keep doing it? You have to be clear on what your goal is as to why you're doing something. And it can't be only why you think, because other people are going to like me more. And that's what you said too. I wrote it down, the in-group versus out-group in social psychology. It's only when there's enough people doing the new thing that others actually feel comfortable to do the new thing. Because in social psych, when you're in the in group, it feels good. You're connected. You're not isolated. When you're in the out group, you're the outcast, the only one doing something. It either goes to like, wow, they're amazing and a star, and they're at this echelon I couldn't reach, or it's like they're the weirdo outsider for liking something or talking about a certain topic. It's fringe. Yeah. And then all of a sudden people are like, wait a second, I kind of like that. And then you funnel, if you're watching this, you funnel more people into the in group or the out group. Then it becomes its own in group. Then people feel comfortable doing it. But it takes a lot of bravery and courage and tenacity and some blindness to like what other people are doing to jump in and be like, no, I'm going to do this. Well, what if it's not successful? Fuck it. I don't care. What if it is? I would rather ask what if it is than what if it's not.
Well, what's it like? Within a healthy, reasonable context, what is the risk of failure? Very little.
Yep.
Like, everyone likes to jump to the hypotheticals that
The
are just
slippery slopes.
asinine, where it's like, oh, I would be $500,000 in debt. You already are. You went to college.
Yeah.
There's
okay, but what if?
and I understand
Yeah,
not everyone's got that, but like
sure.
it's always something where it's
Mhm.
like, well, okay, so tell me, like when I'm doing my business coaching, I love to ask, so tell me, what is the risk of not spending the money?
Yes. Yes.
Tell me what's of not spending.
Mhm.
What do you mean? Okay, so you're gonna park it in your bank account,
Mhm.
but what happens if you don't spend that money?
I
Like
have
that
it.
money alone doesn't save the viability of your
No.
business or getting a product to market or helping you develop the bench within your own business,
Mhm.
whatever it is. Though, like at some point, you have to realize that not risking situations is an active decision in choosing not to grow.
Mic drop. I love it.
So our next segment is called Ask the Experts.
It is. And today we are starting this new segment, but it'll be in every episode that we will pick from Quora or from Reddit a question, and we will give our take on it. Ask the Experts. Our question today for Ask the Experts is, super lighthearted one, pretty, run of the mill. Why am I not a priority in anyone's life? And this is from Quora, and it is, I think, 61 million views. So we shall see. The question,
Just a few.
does it matter? I'm not a priority in anyone's life. Everyone loved me, but they had other priorities over me. I know it might sound ridiculous, but it's true. So I'm curious, why am I not a priority in anyone's life? So I have my own theory on this. If you want, I can go first, or if you would like to take the mic, I'm more than happy to pass it on.
Well, so where I start with this is there's a couple different ways we can go.
Mhm.
One, I'm just going to stick with that. The question was legitimately asked out of a position of curiosity.
Mhm.
Like, why does this keep happening
Right,
to me?
right.
And I think that it's really easy for us to feel like we're the victims in this process. Like, people keep leaving me. I think there's also a spot for us where we can move into an empowerment, and it's
Right.
not victim blaming,
No.
but it's empowering of like, how do I keep communicating to people around me that this is how I wish to be treated?
Mhm.
Because believe it or not, there are ways that we actively communicate to the relationships that we love so much that we wish to be an elective
Mm.
or that we can be discarded in certain ways. And typically what ends up happening is there may start off with a neediness that becomes overwhelming.
Yeah.
And so we love and we crave this thing, but we don't trust the process. We don't trust that this person's actually going to come back to us if there's any level of separation. And we at times also over leverage ourselves. Because we have poor boundaries, we throw ourselves 125% into someone else's life.
Mhm.
And then we're surprised that they don't do the same thing for us.
Yeah.
Like, wait a second, what do you mean you're not going to be here cleaning my house or doing these things? Like, there is a spot where, like, I've started to become more aware of it because I'm a recovering people pleaser myself, of like, no, you don't need to do that for me. Oh, no, but I want to. No. You're doing it because you think that if you do,
Mhm. You'll get
then
something in return.
there's some sort of preferential treatment
Yes.
or that you'll be prioritized because you're doing these things, but they're not true acts of service.
Right.
This is a transactional setup.
Yeah, they're like transacts of service. Transactions of
Yeah.
service. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
So my thought on this, and I did I think a blog post on this a while back, so I will quote from that because it's more eloquent than I could be. That it is your choice to make yourself a priority. So the person that you're dating or in a relationship with or friends with can also make you a priority or prioritize you among other priorities, but their choice and their choice to do so is based on multiple factors. However, you will benefit from making yourself a priority because you're setting an example for how others can treat you. And like you said, when you set and enforce those kinds of boundaries, you are letting other people know, oh, that's how they participate in their friendships and relationships. Maybe they're more of a go-getter and they like to invite themselves to things. And I think that's a piece too for prioritization. If another person is not the type of person to ask first or to interject or to assert, it's probably unreasonable to expect that they would all of a sudden start to do that with you and your relationship and your friendship. So it's also key to take the temperature of who are you friends with. If I'm like the one assertive person and most of my friends are passive, again, unrealistic for me to assume they're all of a sudden going to prioritize it, because that's what I would do. So part of it is checking yourself on your projections, because it's a choice. Like when you're with somebody who isn't prioritizing you, it can either be a mirror to look in and realize where you're not prioritizing yourself, or you can take a look at, like, line up all the friends or all the relationships and be like, oh, this is a theme. Something about me believes I'm not worthy of being prioritized. Therefore, I'm picking friendships and relationships that show this back to me as an area of growth, like a wound that I'm supposed to work on. It also might mean nothing negative or personal about you. And it's about that person's phase of life, where they're at, especially in relationships. Well, why can't you make me a wife or a husband or whatever? Well, I'm focusing on my business. Like, that's my priority, because long term, I want to be at a place in my work where I don't have to worry about going to work and being in a relationship when the person is kind of petulant and they're like, well, I want it now. Like whatever, Veruca Violet, I think, it's either, the one from Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, where there's that entitlement.
Oh, yeah.
You don't always get what you want now. Not everybody does the same things for the reasons you would. And so if you don't prioritize things in your life because they're not important, you are going to be more likely to assume other people do not prioritize things in their life because they're not important, when in reality, sometimes people forget. I know it sounds weird, but they forget to prioritize it because they take it for granted, not because they don't care. But they just go like, oh yeah, I know I have that and I have that and I have this. But something in their brain is making them hyper fixate or focus on whatever it might be in front of them. And I think being mindful, as we wrap up this segment, being mindful that you're choosing to make yourself a priority will set the tone for others. And it's okay to be vocal and let friends and relationships know, hey, this is what it does for me, in a positive way, not in a threatening way. This is how much it means to me. This is what it does for our relationship or friendship when I see that you reach out. When you show an interest in also scheduling time to hang out or events, it makes me feel like I matter. And I know I haven't said this to you before. However, I'm hopeful our relationship or friendship can change now that you know this about me. And it doesn't have to be negative. I didn't blame the person for not reaching out and scheduling. And to the theme of our episode, if you choose to prioritize yourself, you will become more successful at other people prioritizing you. And you can see the adversity of, why is no one prioritizing me, as, okay, how can I pick better friends? How can I pick better relationships? How can I put myself out there more and go find more like-minded people with where you're at now, rather than forcing the non-like-minded people to get on your level? It might not happen. It really might not. And so your energy is better focused, letting those people know, hey, ball's in your court, and then going to find other people where they're already on that level and there's the mutual reciprocity that you desire. So thank you all for listening and tuning in. We hope you liked our new segments of Ask the Expert, and we will see you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Between Two Clinicians. We would so appreciate if this episode resonated with you, for you to share it with somebody, and also find your favorite podcast platform and like, rate, and subscribe to the podcast. We would love to attract more listeners just like you and have this message be spread to whoever needs it. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you next time.